Yes, this is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here. Welcome to the show. We had a good show here today. Oh boy. We've got the newest, of course, Donald Trump stuff. Grievances against a Republican group. So that's going to be fun diving into that story. Of course, a lot of nuance involved there. We also have Steve Mnuchin urging people to go out and travel during the coronavirus epidemic, or I should say, pandemic, since it is affecting the world. We've got Christie saying, why not just reopen? People are going to die anyway. Who cares about grandma when we've got an economy? We also have some other news. We have a co-founder of a very influential establishment news outlet calling on a coronation for Joe Biden. It's a very interesting story. Then, of course, important labor news. We have the VP of Amazon resigning in solidarity with the workers. So that is another interesting story that we have here on today's show. So if you haven't already, please like and share the stream. Very important that you're able to do so. Helps us out greatly. I have a little reminder. Tomorrow, I will be on the Benjamin Dixon Show at about 11 o'clock. So we're going to have a discussion about the establishment, of course, and maybe some other topics. I'll be there for about a half hour, and I'm sure we'll have an excellent discussion, so tune in to that. If you're a fan of Benjamin Dixon, I think you'll enjoy this. If you haven't already checked out our interview, please do so. It's on Spreaker. It's on iTunes. You can find it, of course. Here's the Thing with Jeff Waldorf. That's the name of the podcast. Here as in here with your ears. Not here as in I am here in this place at this time. So here's the thing. It was episode 2 with Benjamin Dixon. So I think you're going to enjoy that. All right. So that said, please, as I said, like and share the stream. There are different ways of supporting the show and making that podcast and this show possible for everyone. And you can do that, of course, by going to patreon.com/TYTNation or signing up to be a channel member in various ways. All right. So let's roll into the first story here. We have Donald Trump not happy about a new Republican ad. President Trump is not happy about a new Republican ad released by the Lincoln Group. Now, the 60-second ad was published yesterday, and it takes quite a few shots at President Trump's terrible response to coronavirus. I want to show you that video, and then we'll discuss it.
There's mourning in America. Today, More than 60,000 Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored. With the economy in shambles, more than 26 million Americans are out of work, the worst economy in decades. Trump bailed out Wall Street, but not Main Street. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment. And with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in America. And under the leadership of Donald Trump, our country is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
That, of course, is a devastating ad from a Republican group. And notice how it played off the old Reagan line. Ronald Reagan, of course, is famous for crushing the unions and introducing us to the failed trickle-down economics, helping this country, of course, get to this point where we are on the edge of an economic disaster. But hey, at least, Reagan was civil. Unlike our president, who, like Reagan, has similar policy proposals, trickle-down economics on steroids, deregulation, union busting, but Trump does do it in a louder way. Speaking of loud, the president took to Twitter to air his grievances about this particular ad. He said, a group of rhino Republicans who failed badly 12 years ago, then again 8 years ago, and then not badly beaten by me, political first-timer, 4 years ago, have copied no imagination. The concept of an ad from Ronald Reagan, Morning in America, doing everything possible to get even for all their many failures. Again, this is clear Donald Trump projection. You see these loser types don't care about 252 new federal judges, 2 great Supreme Court justices, a rebuilt military, a protected Second Amendment, biggest ever tax and regulation cuts, and much more. I didn't use any of them, meaning the consultants, because they don't know how to win, and their so-called Lincoln Project is a disgrace to Honest Abe. I don't know what Kellyanne did to her deranged loser of a husband, Moonfaced, but it must have been really bad. John Weaver lost big for Kasich. Crazed Rick Wilson lost for Evan McMullen to me. Steve Schmidt and Reed Galvin lost for John McCain. Romney's campaign manager lost to Big O, and Jennifer Horn got thrown out of the New Hampshire Republican Party. They're all losers, but Abe Lincoln, Republican, is all smiles. I don't necessarily know if Honest Abe would actually agree with Donald Trump, especially since, for that time, Honest Abe was more of a liberal. Nonetheless, there is a reason, and this is part of what I feel like I'm breaking down here, or what I need to break down. The reason that Donald Trump won over so many working class Republicans is because he is nothing more than a salesman. Doesn't matter what he sells, it's essentially snake oil. He does it, and he does it very well for those who are able to listen or want to listen. The establishment Republicans hide the virulent racism of their party under a thin veneer of code words like urban, and to borrow a phrase from the aforementioned Ronald Reagan, the welfare queens. Donald Trump, unable to grasp nuance or have any sort of filter to his thoughts, speaks plainly, and, of course, has grown up steeped in racism. His racism and contempt for the social class he's not welcomed into on full display. Donald Trump has always wanted to have a place not only with the elites, but be the elitist of all the elites, and harbors a great hatred to those who never accepted a man with 6 bankruptcies and numerous failed businesses. What Trump did correctly is exploit a time in America where hatred of elites is at its highest point ever, and the establishment responded with running even more elites on both sides, Hillary Clinton being the worst and best example of that. However, the very policies Trump brags about are the exact same policies you would have gotten with Jeb Bush, albeit with a slightly nicer face. The establishment's hatred of Trump doesn't reflect the odiousness of his policy positions. No. It's all about the establishment and what they actually value. Civility, comedy, kindness towards your betters. It's the one thing besides shared economic interests that binds the Republican Party and the Democratic establishment together. And it's a war against the rude, the loud, and the uncouth. Make no mistake, Trump is not a champion for the poor or the working class. No, he is a loudmouth grifter who managed to bumble his way into office on the backs of those who are most hurting under the Trump administration. Fellow grifters like Kellyanne and George Conway, who are running at both sides and playing the game in order to enrich themselves. Kellyanne Conway is appealing, of course, to the pro-Trump crowd, while her husband, George, is playing the establishment and resistance crowd to a so far unknown end. Book deal? Perhaps. Future political aspirations? Maybe. Truly, only time will tell. But when it comes to the long game, Republicans have been very effective at pushing their ideology on an American public too caught up with survival. Perhaps the ultimate goal of the Lincoln Project and the Republican Never Trump resistance is to point out that in the future, when Trump is relegated to the embarrassment among the Republican electorate, as George W. Bush was until recently. In fact, I do recall a lot of Republicans who had voted for George W. Bush being embarrassed and not even being able to admit they voted for George W. Bush. The same for Republicans when it comes to Donald Trump. Later on in the future, I bet that there's a situation where a great deal of Trump supporters, or people who are now loudly cheering on Donald Trump, saying, what, me? No, I never voted for that guy. Someone did, but it wasn't me. These same people will be, of course, reined in by people like George Conway and Mitt Romney and others in the establishment on the Republican side when they say, we're not like Trump. We're not the party of Trump. No. We're back in charge now. The people who are civil. We are a new party full of civility and compassion while running, of course, on the same failed ideas of old. I have a feeling this is what this ad is all about. I mean, many of the things that the ad points out, the economic devastation of this country, were started, ironically, from Ronald Reagan and many Republicans following when it comes to, of course, their failed economic policy. And again, I have a feeling this is what this ad is all about. To rehabilitate the Republican Party, add into it two war criminals that they had rehabilitated, George W. Bush and the late John McCain, and the lionization of Mitt Romney, who had once indicted half of all Americans as lazy moochers. You remember that, right? And you have a cadre of terrible establishment Republicans waiting in the wings to rehabilitate this party that, frankly, has no business existing anymore. Now, this is less resistance against petulant disaster that is Donald Trump than the damage he has done to the party's image in embracing the worst of its own fan base. That base will exist after Donald Trump. And now that they've been unleashed, it will be very difficult for establishment Republicans to put them back in the bottle if they can at all. As for Trump, Trump will be Trump, who complain, whine, and tweet as thousands of Americans continue to die for coronavirus, and all that while he continues to ignore it, such as the prices of incompetent, vain Republican leadership. Very angry. All right. Let's go to Christie.
Of course, everybody wants to save every life they can. But the question is, towards what end ultimately? Are there ways that we can thread the middle here to allow that there are going to be deaths, and they're going to be deaths no matter what? And if we can do things to keep people in the mode of wearing masks, of wearing gloves, of distancing where appropriate, we've got to let some of these folks get back to work, because if we don't, we're going to destroy the American way of life in these families, and it will be years and years before we can recover.
That was former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie telling you to suck it up and accept thousands of additional deaths because, well, something. His reasoning is pretty bad. Now, Republicans, of course, have been using the argument of massive poverty and economic harm related to the stay-at-home proposals. But what they don't tell you is that the reason for that is because the government, under their leadership, is actually refusing to help the American people. They have the capability of sending corporations trillions of dollars in federal taxpayer money, but they refuse to do it for you. And they have. Now, if they're able to do that, to give trillions of dollars to corporations, well then, why is it that they're somehow powerless to ever send every American $1,000 a month until this crisis is over? The truth is that they're not powerless to do so. It's entirely within their power, Congress, to be able to send that money to pass a UBI proposal, except that they don't want to do that. The fact that they're refusing to do so, even after bailing out the corporations and the banks, should tell you a lot about Republican priorities. They're willing to sacrifice your life over for their ideology. The ideology, of course, that government is not supposed to help. Now, I understand that maybe in normal times, even though I might disagree with it, the government, of course, is resistant to passing a UBI. Again, I think that actually, in some cases, a UBI would be good. It would depend, of course, on how you do it. But if you do it and preserve other welfare programs, then I think that going into the future, especially considering automation and other factors, a UBI is sensible policy. However, in a crisis, it's not just sensible policy, it is the right policy. It is the perfect time for a policy such as this, when you want more people to stay home so that they do not spread the virus to their family, their friends, their communities. Giving them money to be able to stay home is the smart thing to do. Unfortunately, Republicans and establishment Democrats refuse to do so. These are not normal times. The virus is killing about 2,000 people a day in this country, and that number will inevitably go up. The latest forecast will put that number very soon to about 3,000 people a day. That is one 9/11 every 24 hours. The devastation is quite real already. It will only get worse as we relax the stay-at-home orders. People like Chris Christie, however, believe that the economic cost outweighs the human cost. But unlike human lives, one can bring an economy back. It's not so easy for the families of the dead. Now, Christie also made this argument. We sacrificed those lives. We sent our young men during World War II over to Europe, out of the Pacific, knowing that many of them would not come back home alive. And we decided to make that sacrifice because what we were standing up for was the American way of life. In the very same way now, we have to stand up for the American way of life. We have to stand up for the American way of life by sacrificing the weak, sick, and elderly. That is the message of people like Chris Christie. That is not what World War II was about. World War II was about defeating those who sacrificed the weak in their mad quest for genetic superiority. I'm not saying Chris Christie would have been on the other side for that fight, but you have to be careful about what you advocate for. And what Chris Christie is advocating for is quite dangerous. Getting people out there to work before the doctors and the professionals say that it is safe to do so. Christie, of course, is just one member of a growing list of conservatives who insist that widespread death from coronavirus is a justifiable price to pay for reviving the country's economy by sending regular people back to work for substandard wages. That's what they mean by the American way of life. Sending poor people, poor Americans, back to work for employees who will employers who will underpay them, undervalue them, and overwork them. The newest Republican plan, of course, is to defend those corporations by limiting the liability of their workers who decide who come back and end up getting sick. If passed, these companies will take little to no precautions to defend their workers, as they will, of course, be protected in the end from any sort of lawsuit. and their workers, thanks to the economic downturn and mass unemployment, will be plentiful. This is the real danger of the conservative movement. It's the real danger of people like Christie. The people who claim to represent the working class seem to be more than willing to sacrifice them for their stock portfolios. Not to say the Democratic Party is doing everything in their power to help, with the exception, of course, of a few. The Squad, Ilhan Omar especially, is putting forth policies like a sustained $2,000 a month universal basic income for up to a year after the crisis is over. Combined with policies like rent freezes and mortgage freezes, you don't see the Democrats really offering a long-term solution. Make no mistake, this is a long-term problem. Coronavirus isn't going to magically go away. Cannot will the virus out of existence. Vaccine is at least a year away. So we have to deal with social distancing and other issues for a long time to come. As such, our workers need a strong base of support until it's safe to actually go back to work. More than ever, the working class needs an advocate, and the establishment on both sides needs a message. That message for me is a general strike. Shutting down what little is left of the economy as they try to open it up is the only way to really get their attention. It will be difficult to do, but it will be difficult not to do it. We cannot go back to normal. We cannot exist when it comes to, or society cannot exist the way that it used to be, not without the sacrifice of many human lives. And that is not a sacrifice I think a lot of people are willing to make, unless, of course, you're in the privileged class here in America, the business owner class, the wealth, the wealthy donor class, people at the top. Those are the ones who are trying to send us out to our deaths in order to help them make a buck. We have a choice to make. General strike versus thousands more deaths. I hope we make the right one. Okay. Before I go into the next story here, I do want to address one thing here. Let's see. Valerie Valois says UBI is pointless unless you do rent and healthcare reform. Yes, I agree with that. So understand that a universal basic income, you would have to do some significant reforms to make that work. Again, rent controls. I know people's heads explode, but the rent is too damn high. And you would also have to, as I said before, do something like a universal healthcare system, Medicare for all. It's a simple option. Yes, all of those go together. A universal basic income, Medicare for all, and rent freezes, rent controls. You do. Valerie is absolutely correct. And I don't know if I didn't actually... Yes, I didn't address them verbatim, but no, generally she is absolutely correct on that issue. And so I want to clarify that, yes, that is the situation, pretty much the only situation in which a universal basic income would actually work. Because if you don't do those things, well, then prices will just increase, and then it will take that UBI. It'll essentially turn into a subsidy for the rich. You're absolutely correct on that. Okay. Sarge Tech also points out that there's a story that I was going to consider doing today, but I didn't. And that was the shooting at a Family Dollar in Flint, Michigan. So let me recap that story very quickly. So there was a security guard at a local Family Dollar who had told a woman to wear a mask. That woman did not want to wear a mask. She refused. And there was a verbal altercation. She left. She came back, brought a couple of people with her, one of which had a gun, and fatally shot the security guard in the head. disgusting. This is what happens. A lot of that apparently was over quote unquote disrespect. That was the reason a person had lost their life. Someone had felt disrespected. In reality, disrespect is not wearing a mask in public because you're getting people sick. So that's my perspective on that. You should wear a mask in public to protect other people. And I mean, this is a sick, sick story. Okay. Let's move on. We get Steve Mnuchin. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin is being dragged online because of a ridiculous suggestion. You see, he wants all Americans to begin living on the edge and start traveling. Let me show you.
This
There's
is a great time for
morning
people to
in
explore
America.
America. A lot of people haven't seen many parts of America. I wish I could get back on the road soon. So we're looking to all get back to business.
There's just one problem with Stephen Mnuchin's suggestion. The CDC says you probably shouldn't travel. In fact, they recommend avoiding all non-essential travel in order to protect people against COVID-19. Nonetheless, this guy thinks he's on vacation. Now, here's what the CDC says. Travel increases your chance of getting and spreading COVID-19. The CDC recommends you stay home as much as possible, especially if your trip is not essential. Now, this, of course, stupid advice, incredibly stupid advice, comes from a man who is privileged enough to never have had to work a day in his life. Therefore, is not really exposed to the dangers of COVID-19. This guy, of course, is incredibly disconnected. Understand how disconnected he is from this statement itself. This is not a vacation. It isn't fun time. It's a pandemic where thousands of people are dying every single day. People are suffering economically, mentally from the isolation. I understand that. And so there's a lot of Americans that would love to get away. Add in the cost of getting away and the fact that one $1,200 check is not going to replace all the lost income, the 30 million Americans who are now out of work. But again, Steve Mnuchin doesn't understand that. Essential workers are also being pushed to the brink by anxiety, disease, and low pay. They can't exactly go out and take a vacation. Over 4,000 meatpacking employees have tested positive for the virus. To say that Mnuchin is out of touch is actually pretty charitable. He is dangerous in giving incredibly dangerous advice, which of course is why he got a lot of pushback. Lyndon Johnson says, could we put a travel ban in Mnuchin's mouth? I would agree with that. Asking for 328 million friends. Demand the Truth says, by all means, go and hit the road and never come back. Adds. I almost added hit the road Jack, but I'm not going to do that. Patriot Citizen says people are trying to get us out of the way, all the fewer to battle to come election or attempted coup, whichever comes first. PD says, understand that this is a financial fool genius that said the $1,200 stimulus payment should last Americans 12 weeks, which of course it wouldn't. It would last a month because $1,200. A lot of places, that $1,200 is a month of rent. Another person adds, why is this man saying the exact opposite of what he should be saying? Something is so obviously wrong with these people. And he's right. There is a sickness in America, and I don't mean COVID-19. It's the idea that the wealthy and powerful are there because they're somehow smarter and therefore better than the rest of us. You know exactly, and they think that they know exactly what the country needs. In reality, they know nothing about the lower classes or how we live, their lives, their situations, their motivations, their fears, No, they live in a completely different world of privilege. And in that world, only their lives and their money matters. Put that in the context of what Mnuchin was saying. We need to get back to business. We need to get back to work. So these Americans can take their $1,200 that they apparently have still somehow and to go travel. Have a fun time. Take a vacation. See America. And spread COVID-19 all over the place. Charitable, as I said, to say that Mnuchin doesn't know what he's talking about, super charitable. In reality, maybe not. Maybe he wants the spread of COVID-19 to build up what they call herd immunity. It's something that Republicans have been talking about for quite some time. More herd immunity, which hasn't been shown to exist, by the way, with COVID-19, as people could be reinfected, according to some of the latest studies, that we are not immune to COVID-19, means that this will continue to come back to devastate people. Urging people to go out and travel in this condition right now. There are so many people that are weak, with weakened immune systems. No treatment, no vaccine is incredibly dangerous and callous and completely on brand for someone who puts money above everything else. All right, I'm going to take a break. We're going to come back. We've got more stories here. We have the co-founder of Politico that doesn't want an investigation into Joe Biden. And we have the Amazon VP who is resigning. Excellent. So we'll do that right after this break. Stay right here around the nation.
Mike Pounds.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. TT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so before we get into the show, or back into it, I should say, I want to thank some patrons, patreon.com/TOTNation, that's so you can support the show, and continue to allow this show to grow and become better. I want to thank Stanley Cherwinski and Brian Gruba for signing up. That's patreon.com/TYTNation. That is one of the better ways to support the show. Another great way is the channel memberships, which you can join by hitting the join button below the screen. I want to thank Koru and Jim Wilson. So thank you for signing up. That's channel memberships, hitting the join button below. You're on YouTube. Two different types of memberships. It's basic, it's $2. And then there's, of course, a $5 membership. So sign up. Both of those go to help the show as we remain sustainable. We are doing a patron drive as well. We are trying to get to a lot more patrons than we have. In fact, we lost a few. We're at 376. I'd like to get to 400. So if you can help me by signing up for patreon.com/TOTNation, that is a great way to keep us sustainable. All right. Everybody loves Mike Pounce. Indeed. Not Mike Pence, Mike Pounce. Love to see it.
Mike Pounds.
It's great. All right. So let's see. Do we have any super chats here? Mark Davis says, hasn't been a mass shooting in a while. Does that mean we can talk about gun control now? Oh no, there was a mass shooting in Canada, so obviously you can't talk about that. What is interesting and kind of really sad is that we have celebrated 2 months without a school shooting? Just about. And of course, the reason is nobody's at school. So, of course, the only time that we never have that we don't have mass shootings is because that everybody's in their home during a pandemic. It's interesting. It is interesting. Yeah, originally it was Mike Pounce, but it's a lot of people hear Mike. I don't know. What do you hear?
Mike Pounds.
Yeah, it's Mike Pounce, but it could be Pounce. I don't know. I guess that's up to interpretation. What you hear, it's like the dress. Remember that dress that everybody was obsessed with on social media? You can't actually. You see one different color, and then or the laurel and whatever. All those weird things where it's always about somebody else's perspective and it's something different than other people's. It's kind of the same thing. The mystery of the Mike Pounds or Pounce. Anyway. Yeah. Solve the mystery of school shootings. Just don't have school. Unfortunately. All right. I suppose we should get into it. Moving on. But thank you for the super chat. That's one way to help the show. After weeks of seeing the company crack down, reports of workers' rights violations, and the firing of those bringing up legitimate concerns, the vice president of Amazon has publicly quit, which is really nice. Now, this is after more than 5 years as vice president of the company. Tim Bray wrote a scathing op-ed saying that he was quitting in dismay at Amazon firing whistleblowers who were making noise about warehouse employees frightened of COVID-19. In this letter, Bray defended Amazon workers, including Staten Island warehouse worker Chris Smalls, who was unjustly fired, and Amazon employees for climate justice organizers Emily Cunningham and Aaron Costa, all of whom were fired after leading petitions and protests over unsafe working conditions inside of the warehouses. Firing whistleblowers, he writes, is just a side effect of macroeconomic forces, considering, of course, how Amazon is actually increasing business due to people staying in their homes. But he adds, nor is it intrinsic to the function of free markets. It is evidence of a vein of toxicity running through the company culture. I choose neither to serve nor drink that potion. Poison. That's what it is. Poison. Very strong statement, of course, from an engineer. He was the highest ranking Amazon employee and a distinguished engineer at the company. So to have someone like him publicly quit and speak out is really important. Now, Amazon, of course, has had a lot of issues. We've talked about those in the show before. Workplace safety, employee deaths, injuries, harsh working conditions in their many fulfillment centers, right? And I've talked about those issues before at quite a bit of length. But now you have them firing people for simply raising awareness about unsafe working conditions in a pandemic. Pretty vile, I should say. Many on social media, of course, have been quick to laud Bray for taking this action. Naomi Klein wrote, "This is a very big deal. This kind of courage is what we need right now in every workplace and every walk of life." Another person, social media, said Amazon is basically firing any worker who complains about exposure to COVID-19 or poor conditions. No unions, no free speech, and punishment for whistleblowers. Kudos to Tim Bray, one of Amazon's leading engineers, for resigning in protest. Martin Fowler says, "I admire the action of Tim Bray, resigning from Amazon to support COVID whistleblowers." Bray said he had brought his concerns, of course, to company executives in April. After Cunningham and Costa were fired, after starting a position on behalf of the warehouse workers. Amazon's actions in recent weeks, according to an article by Common Dreams, included its attempted smear campaign against Smalls, who organized a walkout over lack of social distancing protocols and transparency at the Staten Island facility. "Were designed to create a climate of fear," wrote Bray, who also went after his employer as a chicken shit, which I enjoy. Bray acknowledged in his post that Amazon says it's taking precautions to protect workers, but wrote this: "The big problem isn't the specifics of COVID-19 response. It's that Amazon treats the humans in its warehouse as fungible units of pick and pack potential. Only that it's not just Amazon. It's how 21st century capitalism is done." The former company executive also pointed out that the giant, while formidable power in the U.S., has been reined in elsewhere in other countries. For example, France, where Amazon workers are represented by unions. The court last month ruled the company must only complete deliveries of essential products while its warehouse's safety measures are being investigated. France is able to do that because France riots basically any time that there's anything that's against the workers. I'm not saying that as a pejorative. I'm saying that why can't we be more like France? France actually cares about workers' rights. We here in America do not. We seem to care more about corporate rights, or at least our government does. Now, here's what Bray had written about that. "If we don't like certain things Amazon is doing, we need to put legal guardrails in to stop those things. We don't need to invent anything new. A combination of antitrust and living wage and worker empowerment legislation, rigorously enforced, offers a clear path forward. Don't say it can't be done because France is doing it." Brings up a great point. France does things better than America, and so does basically every modern country. Why don't we do that here in America? There's no political will, because corporations, of course, bought off our politicians, and they make laws that help those corporations. Of course, it is a corruption. It's all about corruption. So how could this be done? Well, Bray has an idea. "At the end of the day, it's all about power balances," he wrote. "The warehouse workers are weak and getting weaker. What with mass unemployment in the U.S., job-linked health insurance. So they're going to get treated like crap because capitalism. Any plausible solution has to start with increasing their collective strength. For me, that means mass walkouts. For me, that means a general strike. Those two words, general strike, happen to strike fear in the hearts of every capitalist because it means that workers are using the only leverage that they truly have, their labor. Without their labor, the company cannot make the very things it sells. Without the labor, the company cannot function, just like it cannot survive without consumers of their product, the very same people, of course, that make up their labor force. A general strike denies the company both things. If you're not working, you're not consuming. If you're not consuming, they get no profit. There's no point of work. Those are the actions that can bring Amazon and any company, any government, any society to its knees. And when you have them there, that's the time to extract concessions. The only question is, are Americans ready to take that action, to do a general strike? I believe the time is ripe. It is the perfect time to do such actions because right now, as the economy is stalled out for the most part, except for essential services like gas station attendants, truck drivers, delivery drivers, people in warehouses, as well as people in food service, grocery store workers, they are essential to the economy. And it turns out they've always been essential to this economy and essential for the functioning of an entire country. If they shut down, that's it. Those are the people who have the most power that are powerless in order to change their lot in life, their pay. They often get paid the lowest. They often get treated the worst because they're quote unquote easily replaceable. Turns out during a pandemic, not so much. No. General strike, show them their actual power of labor and get concessions. It is the only way we can fix what's wrong with capitalism. All right. A lot of people in the comments, of course. Good stuff. Let me read a few of those. Our government is subservient to corporations. Yes, weary pirates. That's the problem. Jenna Villalona says, give to the rich, steal from the poor. It's essentially what our government is doing at this point. Law is only equal if you have a ton of money. Ian Anderson is right. Nike is just as bad as Amazon, says Lancer Solaris. You're absolutely right about that. Look, in most of today's problems, you will find corporations, big corporations, at the heart of them. Big corporations oppose everything that is beneficial for the worker. And not only that, but beneficial for society as a whole. For example, climate change. Not rules against pollution. Another great example. Raising the minimum wage. Economic issues. And those economic issues, of course, are not separate from any other issue. Economic issues, social issues are all linked. That's why you have diseases of despair, or what they call them, where you have depression, you have anxiety, you have sickness, illness, you have addiction. All of those tend to go hand in hand with economic conditions. So it's less of a battle between red and blue as there are between the 1% and the rest of us. Okay, let me move on. The co-founder of a very influential magazine on Capitol Hill wants to ignore the Tara Reade allegations into Joe Biden so that he can have a coronation of the former vice president. Now, this is Martin Tulchin, who was a veteran journalist who worked for the New York Times before departing to help found The Hill and Politico. he is rejecting calls for an investigation into Tara Reade's sexual assault allegation against the presumptive nominee and former Vice President Biden. In a letter to the New York Times, which was written in response to an editorial board article titled "Investigate Tara Reade's Allegations," which had become quite serious, Tolchin wrote this: "I totally disagree with this editorial." Now, of course, he's right to air his opinion, to disagree with the article, but the justifications that he uses are suspect. For one, he says this: I don't want an investigation. I want a coronation of Joe Biden. Would he make a great president? Unlikely. Would he make a good president? Good enough. Would he make a better president than the current occupant? Absolutely. He continues by saying, I don't want justice, whatever that may be. I want to win. The removal of Donald Trump from office. And Mr. Biden is our best chance. He concludes the op-ed by saying, suppose an investigation reveals damaging information concerning his relationship with Tara Reade or something else. Mr. Biden loses his nomination to Senator Bernie Sanders or someone else with a minimal chance of defeating Mr. Trump. Should we risk the possibility? Notice how he says Bernie Sanders. Of course, Bernie Sanders, anybody knows, look it up. If you even bother to do any sort of investigation, you would find that Bernie Sanders does incredibly well when matched up against Donald Trump. Does incredibly well with independents, Democrats, and yes, even some Trump-supporting Republicans have signaled their intent, if Bernie Sanders were to be the nominee, to vote for him. And yet, he is singled out. Interesting. Should we risk the possibility, he asks, of what? A Bernie Sanders presidency is unlikely, as it is for Bernie Sanders to be chosen as a nominee over Joe Biden. Even in light of this, he still points out that it would be a really, really bad idea. Well, that's likely because Mr. Tolchin is a member of the establishment. The establishment wants Bernie under no circumstances. Now, Mr. Tolchin, his thoughts, unfortunately, echo many in the mainstream Democratic establishment. Their disdain of progressives like Bernie Sanders is plain, considering how Politico and other mainstream outlets have treated Bernie Sanders during this entire primary process. But it's not about Bernie Sanders. No. It's about justice. It's about truth. Now, does getting rid of Trump matter? Absolutely. Which is why you don't run with Joe Biden. Instead of choosing someone without the level of baggage that Biden has, the Democratic establishment all chose to line up behind Biden during Super Tuesday or before Super Tuesday, ending up with, of course, the massive win of Biden over Bernie Sanders. That forced the Democrats, now that Bernie Sanders has dropped out, into a kind of Hobson's choice. We have two buttons before us. One, of course, is to choose someone with obvious mental decline and sexual assault allegations, or someone with obvious mental decline and sexual assault allegations, although with a blue hat. Those are the choices in front of us. Obviously, on policy, there are some significant differences between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The biggest difference, of course, seems to be based on civility. Joe Biden is nicer, kinder, when he's not, of course, yelling at construction workers and telling activists to vote for someone else. But at least he's never bragged about grabbing women by the genitalia. He's only been accused of doing it. I believe Tara Reade's allegations are credible, and they are worthy of an investigation. Just as I believe the allegations against Donald Trump. It's funny to see the Democrats that are not interested in the investigation claims about Donald Trump or calling for a public investigation of Trump. Whatever happened to believe women? If we're forced into a numbers game, it's no doubt that Donald Trump would end up being the loser based on the sheer number of credible allegations against him and Trump's reported behavior. But when you rode Joe Biden against that, well, the moral high ground is, of course, lost. Unless it's actually addressed in a way that would vindicate the vice president. Fortunately, we don't know if anything in Biden's records vindicates the president or confirms the account of Tara Reade, when she says that she had went to superiors, went to people to complain about Joe Biden's alleged assault. So the fear, I think, from Mr. Tolchin and many in the center left is that these allegations are real based on the history and patterns of invading the personal spaces of women in public places, and of course that they will lose on any sort of moral high ground. Better to ignore them, cast out on the accuser, claim she's a willing agent of a foreign power, and all the tricks the Republicans used in defending their own Brett Kavanaugh against their similar allegations. The biggest revelation here, of course, however, is revealed in what many in the establishment have always wanted. They want a coronation of a candidate that is anything but progressive. Even the mildly progressive, yet careerist, Elizabeth Warren, who was more than happy to stab progressives in the back, is discounted because even the very small amount of change that she would attempt to usher in would be unacceptable to many of those in power. Joe Biden represents, of course, the ultimate in establishment thinking, a decent president, who offers no radical change. In fact, he's told donors that nothing will fundamentally change in a Joe Biden presidency. The only thing in their mind that derails this coronation, unfortunately, is that damn woman who's just daring to ask for a little bit of justice. That's who these people are. It's unfortunate. All right. That's kind of all that I have for you guys today. So I suppose I'll take some comments or read some comments or some questions. Tia Wheeler says, would you like to be shot with a red gun or blue gun? It's essentially what we're talking about. Or as I like to call them, blue MAGA. It's essentially what it is. Joe Biden ran on make America normal again or sane again or the way that it was before Donald Trump. Ergo, make America great again. It's MAGA, but a different color. And that's all it is. Unfortunate. Weary Pirates adds, nothing is fundamentally decent about Joe Biden. I miss the days where sometimes I miss the days where I was a little bit more ignorant about politics. When I didn't know the deep corruption inside of both parties, but the Democratic Party. A lot of you might wonder why I criticize the Democratic Party so much. That's because, well, the Democratic Party was supposed to be the closest to me, to my beliefs, to my policy preferences. They're the people that I'm supposed to enthusiastically vote for when it comes to the primaries, when it comes to the midterm elections, when it comes to the presidential election. All of those elections, I showed up. I voted. Now, I mean, I still plan on voting, as far as I know, especially down ticket. But now, they're turning off a lot of voters through their corruption, through their inadequacy, through their inability to fight for the things that they say, that they profess to believe in. Believe women? I don't think so. Disaster. Do I agree to congressional and Supreme Court term limits? Supreme Court, now, yes. Congressional is a little bit more difficult. I haven't made a decision on that because there are a lot of people who are fantastic in Congress. What I do agree with 100% is eliminating the money in politics so that these establishment figures no longer can continue to have a gigantic money advantage from corporations. So, okay. Anyway, thank you. Love you guys. Thank you for joining the stream. Please like and share if you haven't already. And stay tuned. I'm going to be on the Benjamin Dixon Show tomorrow, 11 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a great discussion. And then hopefully, and I'm still working out the details, but hopefully I'll be able to get Michael Brooks on the podcast for this weekend on Saturday. And it'll, of course, be released on Saturday for the members, for patrons only. And then, actually, not just for patrons only, I will also put it up for members only, these YouTube channel members. I will release that as well for you guys. So that'll be awesome. So join, help out the show, get early access to the podcast. Everyone else will have to wait till it comes out on Sunday. So with that said, thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you later.
Mike Pounds. Wait, you're getting nervous, man.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry. Please clap. You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.